We'd now like to invite up on stage Ashwini Angadi, founder and trustee, Ashwini Angadi Trust, Bilaku Academy, and Arman Ali, executive director, National Center for Promotion of Employment for Disabled People. All right, so I think we can get started. As I said, Den is my co-anchor, so Den, I'd like you to begin this discussion.
I'll just start with Arman. Arman, in last 20 years, what has been the thing that you saw unexpectedly change in a positive manner? And in last 20 years, one thing that you thought it would change, but it didn't change.
Thank you, Dan. I think in the last 2 decades, what has changed and which is very encouraging is a lot of young people with disabilities have come forward. They are able to articulate their thoughts, they are able to fight for their right, they do not need any medium. And also, in the last 1 decade, I would say, the disability discourse has not remained in metro cities like Delhi or Bombay and so on. I think young people with disabilities have started to take up issues at the very basic district or the village level. What has failed us is education, employment, and accessibility. There is a lot of noise around disability. You find disability to be mentioned in every document that you refer to, whether it is, we talk about a film or you talk about anything which is to do with government or private sector, but it remains an afterthought. It remains to answer the basic fundamental right like education for all, employment and accessibility, the freedom to move from one place to another. I think it has not worked.
Thank you, Arman. Ms. Angadi, taking context from Arman, just wanted to know that the education dropout for people with disabilities as a whole, what do you think the main reason behind it?
Yeah, the main issue that we are facing in education is mainly lack of accessing technology. So even though we have various types of technology, we are not utilizing it properly and we are not making children aware of those technology. That's the main issue. And see, I am also running a trust which is mostly, most of our trust runs with inclusion. That means I have both visually impaired and non-visually impaired students. They stay together, study together, they fight together, they do everything together. So I encourage our students with vision impairment to go to regular schools. So they actually, in the beginning, they did not take our students, but I convinced them a lot and I spoke about the laws and rights. So now they are so close to our students. So the main reason is, first we should make our education system and education institution teachers to be aware of visually impaired or else the children with disabilities and whatever the rights and laws and what are the technology they are utilizing it and everything.
Right, and Ashwin, if you just share with us your story as well, because with your family and the support you received, you were educated, and now it's amazing that you're doing so much to help other children and ensure that they have those skills to deal with life and get employment.
Of course, I am from a rural part of Karnataka, so I also born with I always a great gift of God, that's vision impairment. So I went to a school called Shri Ramana Maharshi Academy for the Blind. It is a special school for visually impaired students. So then actually my dream was to become a doctor, but I could not take science even though I had a dream of becoming a doctor. Then I had to take arts. Then I started advocating for people with disabilities. I joined Leonard Cheshire Disabilities as a disabled advocate, and I did so much of I traveled to so many like states like Delhi, Ranchi, Bhopal, Mumbai, and I could solve so many problems like accessibility education problem and like so women, there are many issues faced by women. So those problems are being solved under my leadership, and I used to lead I was a leader of 114 youth. So they are all supported me with making solving a problems faced by women and children with disabilities.
What are some of the things, like 3 things that you think could be immediately done by the government? Also earlier, Dan was talking about how the East, he feels a lot more needs to be done there. South India, he says, is much better for people with disabilities.
See, we have a lesson called political science. We have a subject called political science. We study like Indian constitutional rights and everything. So, along with that Indian constitutional rights, the UNCRPD and PWD Act and every disability related laws should be studied by our students. So then only our disabled are seen in an empathetic way. Otherwise, what happens is we are capable of doing everything. We will be seen in a sympathetic way. Let me give an example. What is sympathetic feeling towards persons with disability? See, when I was just crossing the road, some girl came to me and she helped me to cross the road, and she took a pic with me. And when I went home and I saw her on Facebook with the write-up, I did a great job because I helped her to cross the road. So this is a sympathetic feeling. So if a person with able body, if any person with able body asked any help, will you be taking their pic or putting a Facebook, writing in a Facebook? No, because you don't think it as a help or whatever. But if you help a person with disabilities, you think you have done a great job or whatever. So this is a difference between empathetic and sympathetic. So if our disabled persons should be in an empathetic way, then we should be included on our syllabus. There are many community-based services are also included in schools, like community project-related services are also been included. The same way, the disabled rights and laws should be also included, so that will be the awareness will be built.
To make society more aware and inclusive.
Yeah.
Yes, Dan.
Aman, just to take the question, 2 things that I would like to tell you. First, I would like to tell the language that needs to be propagated on disability. So we all see that people with special needs, people with other things are being referred as people with disabilities. Why and what is the correct language to be used when interacting to people with disabilities? Could you shed some light on that?
We also want to talk about the issues of employment and how we've talked about education, but also employment and what we would like to see corporates and how they should do more in the workplace.
A lot of our energy goes on getting your terminologies right. Okay, and there's no harm if calling a person who's a wheelchair user a person who's a wheelchair user. You're a gentleman on a wheelchair or a lady on a wheelchair. Then calling that person as specially abled and exceptionally abled and so on, taking away the reality from them. If you look at the terminology like Harijan hasn't solved problems of people who are called Harijan. We still have people who die in our country for manual expenditure. Now the thing is that in last 75 years of independence of our country, have we ever seen one campaign which is talking about people with disability? One campaign which is talking about a lifespan approach on disability? You see the school chale hum, like the education for all, you see Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, you see Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. These are all very important. You know, you saw campaigns on domestic violence, you saw campaigns on LGBTQ and so on. But AIDS, HIV/AIDS, pollution, climate. But have we ever seen anything on disability? Can you put one person on a wheelchair when there's an election making it inclusive? Can you put one person on a wheelchair in any campaign that you have? You don't know what are the needs of disabled people. The needs of disabled people are the same as anybody else in this room. Everybody needs education, everybody needs employment, everybody needs housing, shelter.
So I have to say, at NDTV, we have done several, programs and we've covered this issue quite extensively over my career of 20 years, which is why this partnership, I think, works so well.
My deep appreciation for all that, and even Samarth, I think, is fantastic. But disability is a state subject, okay? And disability needs investment. And and when there's awareness, like Madam is saying, like Dan is saying, that if you include disability in everything that you do, it only makes you a better facility. And the law is very clear, and again, what like Ma'am was saying, when you look at disability, you think of disability as a welfare and a charity and to do, but that's not the case. Then talked about cost of disability. What is the cost of disability of a person with disability in this country? Despite you paying tax, what is that you get? You're not able to use public transport. You're not able to use any public building, any public places, any product or services in this country. Is it made keeping in mind the need of disabled people? No. So, and there's a law for all this. It's not something that I woke up this morning and prepared to say this here. It's part of the law which is passed by the parliament of this country, and any product and services has to be disabled friendly. And there is a need to be more programs like this, Samarth and NDTV's initiative to create more awareness about disabled people. And it's a common sense. India is the most populous country in the world. It will also have the highest number of disabled people in this world. And who should we be then?
All right, here I'd like to tell you a bit more about Samarth by Hyundai and why it's not one of those, flash in the pan initiatives. It is a prolonged initiative, and the eventual aim of Samarth by Hyundai is to effect change. We don't want this just to be a conversation that ends today. We need this to be a movement, as we've been hearing from all our panelists today, that looks for barriers to accessibility, inclusivity, physical or otherwise. It makes us all think about how we can remove them. Action with accountability, that's the idea behind this initiative. But where are these barriers to be found? How can they be removed? And who is responsible for their removal? To answer these questions, Samarth by Hyundai is also conducting an annual survey to assess how accessible public places are, how aware and inclusive the citizens are. So if you could tell us, then, where are these places and where are we going to do these surveys?
Yes. Hyundai has chosen 20 cities, and the span that ranges is Delhi NCR, Maharashtra, West Bengal, Kerala, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh.
That's right. So 20 cities across 6 states. Now, the findings of this survey will become part of a white paper. Every year thereafter, for 3 years, we'll revisit those spots to see how they have changed to become more accessible and convenient for those with disabilities. The survey will also take attitudes, perceptions, and mindsets into account to put together a complete picture of how inclusive the city is for those with disabilities. And clearly, through all these conversations we're having today, there's a lot that needs to be done.
Actually, Samarth by Hyundai is one of the most important programs that I have attended, because this program has been co-created with people with disabilities. I have got into calls, and that's made some difference. And when you are taking a path of co-creation, it's amazing when you are co-creating with people with disabilities. Any program, that is something that we all would take forward. Thank you for that. Gargi, would you like to take forward?
Right. Again, about employability, if I can ask you, Arman, that's one thing we want to just come back to. three things that need to be done when we talk about more braille signages or elevators, voice-activated elevators, more ramps. That clearly is something that we need to have more of in our cities, in rural parts. What one of the panelists said earlier is that all of us will have some kind of disability later in life, and so we all need to think about that right now as well for everyone.
One thing, Gargi, I must tell you, disability is not something we should all be scared of. It's not something we should all be afraid of. It's part of life. It's one of the human diversities. Now, for employment, I think it's very important that we have a compliance. The law is very clear. The law says that every establishment with more than 20 employees must have an equal opportunity policy registered at their state with the Commissioner for Disabilities Office. So equal opportunities, like in every, how many establishments can you think of would have more than 20 employees? I think millions of them. And migration is a huge problem for people with disability. One find it very difficult to migrate from one state to another, one district to another, one city to another. So I think that's one. Looking at self-employment, where there is a focus on people with disability, how they can become entrepreneurs with disability. How can you create an ecosystem which supports that?